Hello, and welcome to the Goalie Glove Box. I'm Coach Dan. I'm the head instructor and founder of Dan Blackmore Goaltending, and today we're going to be talking about the difference between performance and development. I'll talk about the difference between the two and how that relates to the mindset we need to bring to each situation. We'll also look at what healthy competition looks like in a practice environment, as well as some tools to help with pressure when we are in performance environments. But before that, I want to give a shout out to Katie Greenway and the Waterloo Ravens for their goalie coaching clinic that I had the opportunity to attend yesterday. Katie is the goalie development lead with the Waterloo Ravens and the goalie coach for the University of Guelph women's ice hockey team, and she ran an excellent session with in-class and on-ice training for coaches within the Waterloo Ravens organization. This clinic was aimed at giving coaches the tools to provide valuable goalie coaching to their teams and covered a variety of topics, from the technical side on what to look for in practices and training sessions, to even non-technical things like how to deal with wrinkles in our practice plans. Oftentimes, myself as a goalie coach, I'll come to the rink with an idea of what I want to work on with my goalies, and then find due to time constraints, space available, or any multitude of factors that I have to make adjustments to my training plan. So it was really good to get some hands-on experience with that and drill design and drill adjustments, and even get exposure to things oriented towards non-goalie coaches. For example, how head coaches can talk to goalies to get more engagement and more focus during their regular team drills. Overall, it was a really good day, so a well-deserved shout out to Katie and the whole Waterloo Ravens organization. I also wanted to talk a little here at the start about the Colorado Avalanche as they continue to stay hot. They did not lose a single game in regulation in the month of November, and they're 9-0-1 in their last 10 games. Obviously, their strength is their offense. They've scored 103 goals in 25 games, which is the most in the NHL, Dallas being the distant second at 93. And when you're scoring over 4 goals a game, you really don't need good goaltending to have success. But they're also getting fantastic goaltending, and they're first in the league in goals against, with only 55 being scored against them. The next best is Tampa Bay at 65, and their goal differential of plus 48 is not only obviously first place in the league this year, but if you look back at last year, there were only 5 teams that had a goal differential better than theirs over the course of an entire 82-game season. Goals against is obviously a team statistic, and Colorado does play well at both ends of the rink, but their goalies are giving them really, really good performances so far this season, and it's translated to a ridiculous start through the first quarter of the season. The 2 goalies that they have, Colorado traded for partway through the year last year. They added Scott Wedgewood from Nashville and Mackenzie Blackwood from San Jose to replace Georgiev and Annunen, and really stabilize their goalie situation when they were struggling early in the season last year. It's working out even better this year, with both goalies above a .920 save percentage and Wedgewood leading the league in wins. What I'll be interested to see is how the workload is balanced between each goalie. Blackwood has experience as a starter and played a career-high 56 games last year, and based on their usage last season, you'd think that Blackwood is the number 1 goalie in Colorado, but he's also coming off a lower body injury that required surgery in the offseason and caused him to miss the start of the season. This has opened the door for Wedgewood to play the majority of the games to start the season, and he's played well enough in them that perhaps they lean on him a little bit more this year and have more of a 1A, 1B or platoon situation. Wedgewood has been a bit of a journeyman backup platoon guy. He's on his 8th NHL organization, and the most games he's played in the NHL was 32 with Dallas in the 2023-24 season. I don't know if his level of play is sustainable, but you'd have to think that if he keeps this up through December, not only will he be getting more starts, but he'll have a decent shot at being one of Canada's 3 goalies at the Olympics. Especially when you factor in the injury to Aiden Hill and the poor start to the year from Montembeault and Montreal, who were both on Canada's 4 Nations team this year. It would be a really interesting full circle moment for Wedgewood, who was on the Canadian World Junior team in 2012 that won bronze. If I was picking the team today, I don't know how I could leave Wedgewood off of the roster. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the rest of the month plays out, not only for Colorado, but specifically for Scott Wedgewood, and whether or not he can crack that Canadian lineup. Another goalie story that came out last week was a potential trade between the Edmonton Oilers and the Pittsburgh Penguins centered around Tristan Jarry. We talked last week about the Oilers' struggles in net. They had a rough game against Dallas, but then Stuart Skinner bounced back and shut out the Kraken. And Tristan Jarry has been pretty good this year, 905 save percentage in 10 games, and he's sitting at about 20th in goals saved above expected. The big thing with this one is salary cap considerations. The Oilers currently only have about $150,000 of cap space, so they're pretty much at the limit, and any trade in is going to have to be money in and money out. Tristan Jarry makes about $5.4 million for the next 3 seasons, while Stuart Skinner, if he was going back the other way, is making $2.6 million for this season, and then he's a UFA. Pittsburgh has roughly $10 million of cap space, so there is room to retain on Jarry, but the price would be quite high, as it would be 3 years of retention, and it would have to be a full 50% retention for the money to work out for the Oilers. Pittsburgh's third goalie, Murashov, was good in the 4 NHL games he played while Jarry was on injury reserve, and he's also been stellar in the AHL. So there might be some motivation to trade Jarry just to clear the way to see what Murashov can do. But he's only 21 years old, so they also might be motivated to keep him in the AHL, let him develop his game there, get a bunch of starts under his belt, and see what he can do next year. The Oilers do have a lot of draft capital in the first 3 rounds for the next 3 seasons, so they do have some significant assets if they wanted to make a move, but they've said that they don't want to make a lateral move, and I'm not sure that getting Tristan Jarry onto this team is a significant upgrade for the price that it would cost to get him there. There's also the concept when you're making trades in the NHL, if your team is drowning, other GMs don't throw you a life preserver, they throw you an anchor. So any moves that the Oilers try to make right now, they'd have to go into it from a point of weakness and of an obvious need in goal. And for that reason, I think they might just try to stick it out, see if Skinner can bounce back. I mentioned he had that shutout against the Kraken, see if that can be a bit of a turning point for his season. And then if they want to make a deal in the future, they can do so from a position of strength. Or at the very least, from a position that's not an obvious weakness that they have to solve for their season to be successful. Moving on to the main topic of today's podcast, performance versus development. The biggest difference between performance and development is the length of time at which we're measuring success. Performance-focused athletes, whether it's in a game or a tryout, are looking very much at the short term. Are we winning the game? What's my save percentage right now? Did I let in any bad goals? Am I having a good tryout? Whereas development-focused athletes in situations like practice, goalie camps, semi-privates, or even games are taking a much longer-term view. They might be setting goals to improve at specific skills, getting better at reading plays, or even statistical measures like having an improved save percentage year over year. You'll notice that I mentioned games as both performance and development opportunities. Most competitive games that we play, our primary focus is on winning, while having a secondary focus of development, keeping good habits, practicing a good mindset during games, making sure that we're going through our motions correctly. But there are also times where development is the primary focus in a game setting. This could be things like early exhibition games and tournaments where you're trying to get your feet underneath you, get back into the swing of things. And especially at the younger level, if you think to those half-ice games at U8 or U9 where you're learning how to play as a team, and for goalies, you're learning how to read plays as passes are going around. These are examples where the games can appear more as a development opportunity rather than one where we're focused on performance. It's important that we recognize what type of environment we are in, and therefore what we should be focusing on when we are in the net. To talk about performance environments, I'll go through it using the example of a big game. Think being in the finals of a major tournament, or maybe even a league championship game. Getting ready to perform starts long before you get to the rink. We'll have a video in the future on pregame prep and routine, but at a high level, we want to make sure that we're feeling good physically and mentally before we step on the ice. This includes eating well before the game, getting plenty of sleep the night before, or maybe even a midday nap before an evening game, having a dynamic warm-up and stretching before you start putting your equipment on, and having a positive attitude at all times. It's okay to be nervous before a big game, but we don't want to be dreading getting on the ice or being afraid of making a mistake and playing poorly. So it's really important that you're doing everything you can to get yourself into a good mental headspace as much as you are getting yourself ready physically. When we get on the ice and we're in a game, everything should be in the moment. Whether it's a big save or a bad goal against, we want to have a very short memory. I like to tell my goalies to be a goldfish. There's the myth that goldfish have a 5-second memory or a 10-second memory. I'm not sure if that's actually the case, but it works for this metaphor. We want to make sure that we're always focusing on in the moment and on that next shot and what we need to do. The skills and the energy that we bring to the game that day are kind of all we have to work with, and there won't be massive improvement by thinking back on every little play after it happens. I'll sometimes see goalies that get scored on in a game, they'll actually go through a movement on the ice as if they were getting across to make a save, might be a backdoor play or something like that. But the time to review is after the game, whether that's in the car with your parents, with a goalie coach at your next practice. When you're on the ice, you really want to just forget about it, move on, and think about the next save. Last point, going back to positivity before the game, when we're on the ice, we want to keep our confidence high at all times. There's a lot of pressure in performance environments, and the emotions of a game are very up and down, and we want to be consistent in being calm, poised, and confident at all times. This could be something as simple as a mantra you tell yourself after a big save, or something you do after a goal against to reset. For myself, I like to talk to myself a little in the net after a goal against. Even saying something as simple as, shake it off, you're a good goalie, and you'll get the next one, was often enough for me just to get a reset, forget about the goal however it happened, and focus on what I had to do now to prevent that next goal. For developmental environments, our preparation should be largely the same as a game. We still want to stretch, warm up, get ready mentally, all of those things. But one key difference is when we're going to a developmental session, we can lean into the negatives a little bit more. It's important that we do this in a constructive way. Maybe you come to practice thinking, I've been really struggling with my RVH lately, and I want to work on that. Or I got scored on a lot through traffic over the weekend, and so I want to work on screens. This is a much more constructive way to be negative compared to things like, I've been playing terribly lately and I've been letting my team down and I need to get better because of that. It's important that you're focusing on specific skills or aspects of your game that will build towards your long-term goals. Again, we'll talk about goal setting in the future, but you should be thinking about why you're working on something or why you want to work on something and how that all works into your specific long-term developmental goals. This goes for coaches and goalie coaches too. Like I said, when I come to the rink, I have a rough idea on what I want to do and over the course of a season, how I want to progress training. But every goalie has different goals, and therefore they have different skills that they need to improve on to work towards those goals. And training needs to be tailored towards those skills. So maybe with one group of goalies, I can focus more on situational awareness, looking off the puck when it's in the corner, making correct decisions when they're sliding or getting out to a pass on their feet. Whereas with other goalies, I need to focus more on fundamental things, how to make stick saves correctly, how to control their rebounds, where their eyes should be going on high shots or shots to their body. You really have to look at the individual goalie, what their long-term developmental goals and needs are, and adjust your training to fit that. You can also take a lot more time to think and review when you're focusing on development. Being able to be critical of yourself without overdoing it is an important skill and something that an experienced goalie coach will help you with. Take things slowly, especially if it's a new skill. I like to get my goalies to work at 60 to 70% speed if it's something that they're struggling with, and then as they get more and more comfortable with it, we start ramping up to game speed. Communication is also incredibly important in developmental environments. Talk to your goalie coach if something feels off, uncomfortable, or wrong. It might be that it's just a new skill and you need some more practice time and some more reps with it to get used to it, or it could be something that needs to be adjusted. Goalie coaches are human too. There are times where we might identify an issue with your game when it's actually something else, and there are times where we might try to tell you to do something that just doesn't work for your specific style of play. Even if you're making a bunch of saves in a drill, it's important to build good habits and get comfortable with the skills that you're developing so that as the game gets faster and as players get better over the course of a season, we have the comfort and the confidence in our abilities to speed up with them. So again, making sure that whatever training you're getting and whatever skills you're developing while working with your goalie coach, you're feeling comfortable with it. And you know that, okay, even if my goalie coach isn't here giving me all these reminders in practice and constantly droning on and on and on at me, I feel comfortable enough with this where I can be self-critical in a practice and make sure that I'm building those habits within that technique. One last point I'll make on developmental environments is that it's still good to leave room for competition in practice. Whether you're competing with your goalie partner, getting into competitive drills against your coaches or teammates, or even just challenging yourself, practices give us a low-pressure environment where we can sometimes strike a balance between development and performance. As an example, there are times where I want to have my goalies train their explosivity and their ability to just battle in the net, rather than always focusing on perfect technique and control. For coaches, adding competition to drills is also a good way to keep things fresh over a long training session. As an example, maybe we start with a simple drill involving stick saves and then recovering to follow your rebound before coming back out to a second puck and then having another stick save. That's something that's good to train the very specific skill of controlling the puck with the stick, getting used to how it feels, how it looks when the puck is coming in, and following your rebound. But then we can make it a competition. For example, we could tell the goalies, for every puck that comes back out to the middle and doesn't get deflected to the corner, you have to do 5 butterflies at the end of the drill. That's a good way to get them a little bit more engaged in the drill, and it gives them some sense of competition, even when they're in a practice environment. If I were to sum everything up between development and performance, I would say that the real skill is in identifying the type of environment that you're in and striking the appropriate balance between performance-focused and development-focused so that we can be our best selves every time we're on the ice. Looking ahead this week and into December in general, I think it's going to be really interesting to see which goalies start to make their mark in terms of making their respective Olympic teams. Whether it's poor performance from goalies who are at Four Nations, or injuries to some of the top names, or even just to some of the younger goalies who are having hot starts to the season, there's going to be a lot of juicy storylines as we head towards the December 31st deadline, which is when those Olympic rosters have to be submitted. I've already mentioned today Scott Wedgewood, and last week I talked about Philip Gustafsson and Jesper Wallstedt for the Swedish team, but I'll also be looking at guys like Spencer Knight and Jeremy Swayman for the American team, who are both having good starts this year, and obviously Swayman was one of the goalies on their roster for the Four Nations. On the Finnish side, none of their goalies are at a save percentage above .900, and while Jussi Saros has already been named to the team, it'll be interesting to see if any of those goalies can go on a bit of a run down the stretch here and really cement their place on this Olympic roster. I think between Luukkonen in Buffalo, Lankinen in Vancouver, and even Korpisalo in Boston, you're just kind of looking for one of these guys to step up this month and make the decision easy as to who's going to be the number 2 or even the number 3 behind Saros when it comes to the Olympic roster. Of those 3 that I mentioned, Lankinen is the only one that's really played a starting role for his team, and even then that's only been because Thatcher Demko went down with injury, and he has some pretty bloated numbers this year as well. I think if he can step up, be the starting goalie that Vancouver needs him to be, and put up decent numbers, I think he's got a good shot to make the team. Of all 4 of the goalies, including Saros, Luukkonen has the best save percentage, but he's only played 7 games, so it'll be up to whether or not he gets more playing time to show that he can be an option for them. Either way, it's going to be really difficult to make that decision, I think, from a Finnish perspective. If I had to handicap it, I would say probably Lankinen and Luukkonen as my picks. But again, if Korpisalo goes on a run and the other two don't improve their game significantly, I could easily see him stealing one of those spots as well. Similar to that, I'll also be interested to see which of the Czech goalies can take a run at joining Lukas Dostal, who has also been named to that team. For the Czechs in particular, you have Vladar, Vemelka, and Ridic, who are all veterans and good options behind Dostal, but there may be a case for bringing a guy like Jakub Dobeš from Montreal. He hasn't been very good lately, but he was off to a good start at the beginning of the year, and sometimes teams like to bring a young guy to these tournaments and get them some experience if they think they're going to play a major role in the future of their national team program. Because of this, I think that if Dobeš can go on a bit of a run here down the stretch, and with Montembeault's play, I think Dobeš is going to get a good amount of games. I think he can make a case for himself to make that Team Czechia and get himself a spot on an Olympic roster. We'll do a video closer to the deadline about my predictions and reactions to the Olympic rosters. But for now, those are kind of the stories I'm looking at goalie-wise going into the month of December. We'll wrap up this week's podcast with the performance of the week from Dan Blackmore Goaltending. For this, we'll be sticking with the Waterloo Ravens theme from earlier in the podcast, as the performer of the week this week is Dana Bender from the Ravens U15 AA team, as she earned a shutout in a 5-0 win against Sarnia. Her and her goalie partner, Tenny, have been huge reasons as to why they're a top team in the league. They've only given up 5 goals against in 10 league games, and Dana is continuing to show why she's one of the top goalies in the province. Thank you again if you made it all the way through. I hope you can take something away from today to your next game or practice. If you'd like to leave any feedback, or if you'd like to learn more about the goalie coaching services that I offer, please reach out to me at danblackmoregoaltending@gmail.com. or follow and DM me on Instagram at Dan Blackmore Goaltending. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next week.